morning, everyone, especially to the human rights education students of Tarlac State University. For last meeting, we have discussed about the definition of human rights and its characteristics. For this meeting or for this video, we will be discussing about the different definitions of human rights education. I will be your instructor for today, Ricardo Mariano. So the contents of our video for today are the different definitions of human rights education as stipulated by the United Nations Decade for Human Rights Education, the definition of Amnesty International, the definition by Asian Regional Resource Center for Human Rights Education, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. In the first definition, the United Nations Decade for Human Rights Education, it was called decades considering that it was crafted from 1994 to 2005. Okay, its direct definition is human rights education is about training, dissemination, and information efforts aimed at the building of a universal culture of human rights through the imparting of knowledge and skills and the molding of attitudes which are directed towards many things such as the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Okay, so when we say human rights education, it's not all about teaching. Okay, it also includes training. Okay, or putting up with the skills. Okay, or creating the skills for those undergoing human rights education. Okay, aside from disseminating the information, okay, or information campaigns, so that we will have a universal culture. Again, we have tackled universality, which means it is applicable to everyone. So we want to have a universal culture, or we want to have a culture wherein human rights is applicable to everyone. How do we do that? By imparting knowledge, okay, developing the skills, and having or developing the attitudes also of all persons undergoing human rights education. So there it is, knowledge, skills, and attitudes, or some call values. In teaching, dapat hindi talaga nawawala yan. Aside from developing nila the knowledge of the students through teaching, dapat natuturuan din sila or tayo ng skills, okay, or how we apply this knowledge and the attitudes or values. So hindi lang knowledge, skills, pati dapat yung values natin o yung ating emotional aspect, spiritual aspect ay nade-develop din. Okay? So what is the direction that we are looking for or we are aiming for in human rights education? We want to strengthen, okay, the respect for human rights. Kasi yung human rights, nandiyan naman yan eh. Ang problema lang, is it being observed? Okay, is it being respected? So ang goal ng isa sa mga goal ng human rights education is to ensure the respect for rights and the freedoms. Okay, sometimes they are used interchangeably, rights and freedoms. Okay, so rights are of course what is due to us. Okay, or what we can demand. Because as stipulated by the law, ito yung pwedeng this is what we should receive. Okay, in which we can demand, say for example from the government. Okay, freedom is being able to move, okay, being able to do or to act the way you want to. Okay, what else? The full development of the human personality and the sense of its dignity, of course. So we want our personality, our human personality to be fully developed. Okay, yung talagang we will be good people. Okay, okay, we will have a sense of dignity, or we will be proud of ourselves. We will have self-respect. Okay, yan yung mga goals ng ating human rights education. There is also the promotion of understanding, respect, gender equality, friendship among all nations, indigenous peoples, and racial, national, ethnic, religious, and linguistic group. So gusto natin nagkakaintindihan lahat. Na lahat ay nagbibigay ng respeto sa isa't isa, mapalalaki ka man, babae, taga China ka man, USA, Russia, North Korea. So dapat may friendly relations daw tayo sa kanila. Okay? indigenous people, whether you are Aita, you are an Igorot, ganyan. So dapat yan, meron ding understanding and respect among these indigenous peoples. Okay, whatever your race, whether you are Mongoloid, Australoid, okay, Caucasian, then whatever your nationality, again, Filipino, American, Chinese, Japanese, ethnicity, okay, or as to your from what specific or more small culture are you from, whether you are from you are an Ilocano, Kapampangan, religious, you know the religions and the different modes of communication such as English, Filipino, again Kapampangan, Ilocano, and the like. Dapat lahat ng yon, despite the differences, there shall be understanding and respect. What else are the directions we are aiming for? The enabling of all persons to participate effectively in a free society. Because of course, once there is once human rights are observed, walang mahihiya. Lahat tayo magpa-participate na para yung society natin will be free. Walang kumbaga, walang mga dictators, okay, in our society, because we know and we demand that our rights are respected. And lastly, the furtherance of activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Of course, if human rights are observed, there will be peace. Okay, kung irerespeto natin yung right to life, liberty, property, right of speech, right of redress, pag irerespeto natin yung mga rights ng mga tao, there will surely be peace. So what is human rights all about, or human rights education all about? It's all about the obligations on states to recognize, respect, protect, promote, and fulfill human rights as mandated across the broad range of international human rights treaties. Okay? Again, most of our human rights are taken from treaties or yung agreements between different countries, whether bilaterally or by TUS o kaya naman as an international organization. Most common of which is the United Nations nga. Okay? So, yun. With the treaties kasi, although hindi ganun kalakas yung mga international organizations kasi hindi naman nila pwedeng ikulong yung isang buong bansa. Pero, from that treaties, nagkakaroon ng obligation yung mga bansa na sundin, respetuhin, protektahan, at ipalaganap yung human rights ng mga tao. Or human rights, as I've said. Okay? And, although yun nga, walang pangil, kumbaga sabi nga nila, sometimes ang international organization, unlike criminal law kasi, di ba, pwede nating ikulong yung mga tao pag nag-violate sila ng human rights, pag nakapatay sila, nagnakaw sila, ganyan. Pero sa international community kasi, hindi mo naman pwedeng ikulong yung isang bansa. Ang pwede lang penalties ng isang bansa is yun, tatanggalin nyo siya sa grupo, hindi na kayo makikipag-interact sa kanila, okay, hindi na kayo makikipag-trade, wala nang business sa kanila, ano pa, last resort na lang kasi yung gera talaga eh. Tsaka lang gagawin yon pag talagang grabe yung violation of human rights. Okay? And what else? Human rights education is an essential tool for meeting these obligations. Of course, sabi nga natin, human rights should be made known to everyone. Kasi pag hindi alam ng iba, yan, hindi nila ma-feel yung kanilang human rights, hindi nila may pagtatanggol yung rights nila. So para ma-meet yung obligations na sinabi natin kanina for rights to be respected, recognized, fulfilled by the government, dapat alam ng mga tao yung rights nila. And that can be done through human rights education. Human rights education is learning about, through and for human rights. So dyan pumapasok yung knowledge, skills, and values. Yung about, through, and for human rights. So let's see in the next slide. The objectives of human rights education is the knowledge or learning about human rights na sinabi natin kanina, skills or learning for human rights, and the values, which is learning through human rights. Okay, yan yung nasa discussion din earlier. We learn about it so that we gain the knowledge. We learn for human rights, therefore we need to be skilled in protecting the rights of others or the rights of ourselves. And we must learn through human rights by inculcating the values related to human rights. So we will tackle them one by one. As to knowledge, we must promote awareness and understanding of human rights issues so that people recognize violation of human rights. Kasi nga naman, pag hindi alam ng taong human rights nila, hindi nila alam, na-violate na pala yung kanilang rights, di ba? So we must promote it. We must make it known to people. Dapat aware sila at naiintindihan nila yung kanilang rights. What else? The belief that every human is born with the inalienable human rights listed in the UDHR or the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Ang ano natin dito, yes, inalienable. I think this was discussed already last meeting, or rights being fixed on a person and cannot be taken away from them as a general rule. Rights yan ng tao, hindi mo pwedeng bawiin sa kanila. General rule, exemption pag may ginawa sila. Okay, such as nag-commit sila ng crime, yun, yung right to freedom nila, ma-curtail kasi hindi na sila pwedeng hindi na sila pwedeng gumalaw or pumunta kung saan nila gusto kasi makukulong na sila. Okay, so rights are inalienable, hindi sila pwedeng matanggal sa'yo except pag may gagawin ka. So we must also know the key concepts such as freedom, o yun nga, yung freedom to move, to act, justice or giving what is due to a person, equality or being equal on all respects. So kung baga, pag sinabi mo kasing equality, mayaman ka man o mahirap, pag kumbaga binigyan ng ayuda yung isa, bibigyan din dapat ng ayuda yung isa. Yun yung equality eh. Pero kung ang sasabihin mo, gusto mo lang bigyan ng ayuda, for example, yung mahirap, that is equity. Okay, binibigay lang natin yung dun sa nangangailangan para lumevel siya dun sa hindi na nangangailangan. Okay? Then we have human dignity or the self-respect or self-pride. Non-discrimination, again, discussed last time about, of course, applying the rights equally to everyone, whether whatever their status in life. Democracy or leaning towards the majority decision. Sustainability, meaning kahit gaano pa katagal yung panahon na magdaan, pwede pa rin, okay? Nandun pa rin yung human rights, okay? Poverty, you know that very well already. Universality being applied to everyone. Rights or the things that should be given to you or the things you deserve and you can demand because it is your right. Your responsibility or your duties. So hindi lang right, dapat meron ka rin responsibilities. Interdependence, again, discussed last time. Rights are interdependent or they depend on each other for them to be recognized or to be observed. Okay, solidarity or being one or being united, and of course, peace. Okay, or the absence of disorder. Yan. What else are included in knowledge? The idea that human rights provide a framework for negotiating and agreeing on standards of behavior in the family, school, community, and the world. Very true. Yung human rights na yan, although sinasabi natin na, nandyan na siya, hindi naman yan basta nandyan na siya, ganun na lang, ginawa lang yan ng ganun-ganun lang. Of course, human rights are a product of negotiation and agreements. Okay, pinag-usapan yan na dapat ba na maging human rights ito o hindi. Pinagbotohan yan ng mga inelect nating public officials, okay, ng mga na-appoint na representatives sa United Nations. Yan. Okay? So it is negotiated and agreed upon. Hindi siya basta-basta lumalabas lang, sumusulpot kung saan. There is also interdependence of civil, political, and economic, social, or cultural rights. So these are the rights embedded in your constitution actually. Civil rights, political rights, rights on the economy, social, and cultural, which we'll be discussing later on para mas may suspense pa. Okay? What else? Recognize the root causes of human rights issues or concerns. So of course, there are violations of human rights whether we admit it or not. Nandyan na tayo. So we identify bakit nga ba? Okay? So probably the easiest question is easiest answer can be because of lack of information. Kasi hindi alam ng tao, ng ibang tao yung rights talaga nila. Kaya nagkakaroon ng human rights violations. Understand human rights terms and concepts according to age, grade, or level. So we have mentioned already concepts earlier. And yun, sometimes rights depend on age also. Di ba? Parang yun nga, if you are a child, you have other rights that are already parang ganun, hindi nakasama dun sa matatanda naman. For example, the right to play, di ba? Actually, ang mga bata, may ano talaga yan, may right to play sila. Hindi pwedeng yung talagang puro aral lang. Kaya nga si DepEd, di ba, meron silang nilabas na rule, although dahil DepEd, sa mga ano lang yun, elementary and high school na bawal na yung bawal yung assignment. Sabi nila, di ba? Naging issue yun dati. Bakit? Kasi of course, in furtherance din ng human rights. Kasi kung puro assignment yung ibibigay natin sa students natin, especially sa mga bata, ano pa yung panahon nila para makapaglaro, makapag-enjoy, which is kailangan din ng mga bata. Okay, so there are rights that, yun nga, depend on the age also. In contrast, meron din naman yung rights na wala sa bata, pero pwede naman sa matanda, such as the right of suffrage or the right to vote. Of course, yung bata, pwede naman siyang bumoto siguro sa klase nila, class president, secretary, and the like. Pero hindi pa siya pwedeng bumoto sa election until she is 18 or he or she is 18. So yun naman yung right na meron yung matanda na wala pa sa bata. So it depends on your age also. Okay? So after knowledge, we now go to skills. So we should develop skills and abilities necessary for the defense of human rights. So dapat kaya nating depensahan yung rights natin, and if you want to become law enforcer someday, of course, dapat kaya nyong protektahan yung rights ng iba. So we must have active listening and communication. We must be able to listen to different points of view, advocate your own rights, and those of other people. So yan dapat kaya nating tanggapin yung opinion ng iba. Okay? Hindi lang dapat yung opinion natin, yun na yun. Bahala kayo sa opinion nyo. Hindi pwedeng ganun. Dapat kaya nyong pakinggan din yung opinion ng iba. Okay? And aside from that, dapat kaya nyong i-advocate o ipaglaban yung right ninyo. And yun nga, kaya nyong ipaglaban yung rights ng iba. Critical thinking, which is about finding relevant information, appraising evidence critically, being aware of preconceptions and biases, recognizing forms of manipulation, and making decisions on the basis of reasoned judgment. Okay? So dapat kaya nyong maghanap ng relevant information. Kumbaga, yun nga, just like in any other course or subject, hindi kasi talaga lahat may bibigay ng teacher nyo. Sabi nga nila, there is no monopoly of knowledge. Kahit pa doktor, kahit pa abogado yung teacher nyo, meron at meron siyang hindi rin alam. Okay? Meron kayong alam na hindi rin siya alam. Although generally, of course, mas maraming alam yan kasi teacher nyo nga. Pero may parts pa rin na hindi siya alam at kayo alam nyo. Okay? So you need to be able to find the relevant information of your own also. Okay? And you must also know how to appraise evidence or evaluate evidence. Okay? Hindi dapat yung porket nakita nyo na, uy, may nagsabi na ganito, ganyan, na ano ba yung pinakabago ngayon? The Senate approved in its third and final reading the law on lowering the height requirement of Philippine National Police applicants, di ba? So napakaganda, maraming masaya diyan kasi marami sa ating Pilipino hindi nabiyayaan ng tangkad, ngayon pwede na sila, binaba na yung ano. Pero i-evaluate nyo muna yung evidence, yung information. Sabi niya, approved in the third and final reading of the Senate. How about the House of Representatives? Naprobahan na ba siya? Because it must be approved in both houses. How about the President? Napirmahan na ba ni President? Kasi hanggat hindi niya napipirmahan, hindi siya nag-o-okay dyan, walang effect yung ating bill. Bill pa lang siya, hindi pa siya law or act. Okay, so you must be able to appraise evidence. Hindi yung porket nakita nyo, nabasa nyo, tapos na. Alamin nyo rin kung kompleto ba talaga siya. Okay? Be aware of your of preconceptions and biases. Ayan. Going back to the discussion of human rights, baka naman yung tao medyo may bias siya, may pinapanigan siya. Tignan nyo rin yon. Okay? Tignan nyo rin, baka merong form of manipulation o baka kinokontrol lang tayo. Okay? Make decisions on the basis of reasoned judgment. So, of course, before you decide, there must be reason for your decision, okay, or your judgment. Hindi yung kumbaga magtotos coin ka lang kung anong gagawin mo. Okay, dapat may dahilan ka kung bakit mo gagawin yung isang bagay. And all of these are related to human rights, okay, or human rights education. Of course, before you act, tingnan mo, ipaglalaban ko yung rights ko, sabi mong ganon. Pero ang tanong, baka naman habang pinaglalaban mo yung rights mo, may na-violate ka ng mga rights ng iba. So, kailangan, before you act, before you decide, make sure that your reasons are right and proper. What else? The ability to work cooperatively and to address conflict positively. Yan. Lalong-lalo na if you become law enforcers, even if not, if you become workers in the future, kailangan magaling kayong makipag-cooperate. Yung tipo, hindi naman sa tipong plastikan, no? Pero yung kahit magkaiba kayo ng pananaw ng tao, kaya mo pa rin dapat makipagtrabaho sa kanya. Kahit na may conflict kayo, ito yung pananaw mo, ito yung pananaw niya, dapat kaya nyo pa rin magtrabaho with each other. Kahit magkaiba kayo ng interpretation ng human rights. Okay? Kasi, again, that is another, kasi tanong natin kanina, what can be the root causes of a human rights concern? One of the causes is multiple interpretations. Kasi kung isa lang interpretation ng batas, pare-parehas tayo, walang problema eh. Alam natin na lahat na yun ang ibig sabihin. Pero dahil iba-iba yung interpretation natin, doon nagko-conflict. Okay, sino ba yung tama? Kumbaga, yun yung trabaho ng mga ng mga lawyers natin. Okay? Magkakaiba sila ng interpretation, ilalaban nila kung sino yung tama yung interpretation sa kanila. Okay? The ability to participate in and organize social groups. Yan. So, dapat kaya nating sumama sa mga grupo, kaya rin nating gumawa ng grupo within our society. Okay? Ano ba yung mga common na grupo na ino-organize? For example, although wala pa kasi kayong trabaho labor unions. Okay? Kapag kayo ay, although hindi to applicable sa inyo, if you become law enforcer someday, okay, more or less dun sa mga nasa private. Or meron din naman, may union din ang mga government officials. Not sure kung pwedeng magka-union ang law enforcers, to be honest. Okay? Pero government officials in themselves, pwede silang meron din silang sa kasi, sa mga private employees, pwede silang magka-union, collective bargaining agreement. Sa mga government employees, pwede rin silang makipag-agreement Okay? But nonetheless, going beyond the point, yun. Dapat kailangan, kaya nating makipag-participate and mag-organize ng mga groups. Okay? In your case, siguro, students, yan. Yung mga grupo nyo sa LYC, yan. Kung may iba pa kayong grupo sa school, pwede rin. Kung may ibang grupo kayo sa, let's say, church, ganyan, sa labas, okay, may riders group kayo, yan. So, those are groups actually. Okay, social groups na kailangan kaya nyong sumama, kaya nyong gumawa para may paglaban nyo yung rights nyo. Okay, because yun, again, that is another form of human rights that can be seen in the Bill of Rights or Article 3 of the 1987 Philippine Constitution. Yung the right to organize, okay, right to organize groups for lawful purposes. Although not exactly the proper phrase, pero parang gano'n. Yung karapatan yung mag-organize ng grupo nyo, basta dapat for a lawful cause. Hindi yung mag-organize kayo ng grupo nyo para gumawa ng kalokohan. Yun, hindi pwede yun. Acting to promote and safeguard human rights both locally and globally. Okay, so we must promote, okay, or we must, ang Tagalog niya, ipalaganap, protektahan natin yung human rights, whether sa local setting, sa Pilipinas, sa community, or even the global setting or the world. Now we go to values or the development of attitudes of respect for human rights. So people do not violate the rights of others. So yun, dapat we respect the rights of others. Okay, we respect human rights so that we will not be violating the rights of others. Okay, a sense of responsibility for one's own actions, a commitment to personal development and social change. Yan. So dapat ano man yung gawin natin, we should take responsibility. Okay, hindi yung may ginawa tayo tapos isisisi natin sa ibang tao, hindi ganon. Okay? Ano pa? Commitment to personal development. We must always ensure that we are developing every day, every week, every month, every year. Okay, sabi nga nung isang mentor din natin last time na nagkita kami. Sabi niya, parang pangit naman kung yung Mariano nung say for example nung 2012 kaparehas pa rin nung Mariano nung 2020. Ang ibig sabihin niya lang yun, dapat nag-i-improve yung tao. Kasi kung hindi ka nag-i-improve, kung ano yung pangit na ugali mo dati, ganun pa rin hanggang ngayon, wala. Okay? That would not be a good showing, okay, of our personality. Okay? What else? Curiosity, an open mind, and an appreciation of diversity. Yun. Di ba? Lagi nilang tinatanong sa'yo, open-minded ka ba? Okay? Although being a joke, pero totoo yun. Dapat we should be open-minded. Kumbaga, kung yun yung paniniwala ng mga taong ito, di i-open natin yung isip natin na bakit kaya? Okay? Curiosity naman na yun. Bakit kaya ganun yung pananaw ng mga Ilocano, ng mga Kapampangan, ng Igorot, ng mga Chinese? Yan. Okay? And pag nalaman na natin yung dahilan, ganun pala. So, we can then appreciate na iba-iba talaga tayo. Okay? Try to imagine kung pare-parehas tayong lahat, walang diversity. Hindi naman sa pangit, pero it would somewhat be boring. Okay, lahat tayo parang iisa lang lahat yung ginagawa natin, walang pagkakaiba, para tayong mga robots, di ba? So talagang merong diversity. Okay? Empathy and solidarity with others and a commitment to support those whose human rights are under threat. Okay, we must have empathy. Ano ba yung empathy? It is the ability to or the feeling, okay, yung nararamdaman mo rin yung feelings ng iba, empathy. It is different from sympathy in a way na sympathy naman kasi is the ability to take part on the hardship of another person or whatever he or she is feeling. Kaya nga 'di ba uso yung term na sympathize, sabi nila gano'n. So habang nagpo-push up yung klase mo, magpo-push up ka rin kasi you will sympathize, you will take part in his undertaking as compared sa empathy, yung mararamdaman mo lang. So maawa ka lang, uy, kawawa naman si buddy. Kaloko niya kasi ganito yung ginawa niya, na-push up, na-punish tuloy siya. Okay, empathy lang 'yon, pero yung sasabay ka, okay, that is more on sympathy. Okay? Solidarity, again, we have already mentioned that as being one or united. Okay? So what else? Being yun. Who will you have empathy or who will you be united with? Dun sa mga tao na nava-violate yung human rights nila. So pag pakiramdam mo, uy, parang kawawa tong tao, nava-violate yung rights niya, samahan mo siya, ipaglaban mo yung human rights niya. Okay, ingat-ingat lang, baka yun nga. Pag ang usapan ay right to life, baka mas magandang tumawag ka na lang ng police officer kaysa magpakabayani. Kumbaga. Okay? What else? A sense of human dignity, of self-worth, and of others' worth, irrespective of social, cultural, linguistic, or religious differences. Yun nga. So you must have your dignity or your pride, your self-worth. Alam mong may halaga ka, despite nasabihan ka na ganito, ganyan, wala kang silbi, wala kang kwenta, bobo ka. Hindi. You have self-worth. Meron kang silbi. Okay? Although sinasabi sa iyo ng tao, alam mo, merong some part, meron kang naitutulong, okay, sa iyong community. Okay? And with that being said, of course, i-apply mo rin sa iba. Hindi lang ikaw, dapat pati yung iba. Merong silbi lahat ng tao, walang taong walang silbi. So, kailangan irespeto mo rin sila. Okay? Whatever your status, mahirap, mayaman, your culture, the way you speak, your faith or belief, yan, dapat respetuhan. Okay? Sense of justice or giving what is due. Kumbaga, kung right niya yun, ibigay mo sa kanya. Okay? Do not withhold. Okay? Desire to work towards the ideals of freedom or being able to do what you want to do, being equal with others, and ayun, respect the differences or diversity. Okay? So that's it about the discussion of the knowledge, skills, and values as defined in the United Nations decades on human rights education. Now we go to the definition of Amnesty International. This is an organization actually, okay, Amnesty International, aside from the United Nations, another international organization. It says that human rights education is a deliberate, participatory practice aimed at empowering individuals, groups, and communities through fostering knowledge, skills, and attitudes consistent with internationally recognized human rights principles. So when we say human rights education, it is deliberate, meaning intentional, pinagplanuhan talaga yan. Hindi lang siya nag-pop up. Okay, it was done through negotiations, agreements, and it is participatory. Okay, participatory practice meaning hindi lang pwedeng isang tao lang magsasabi na, oh, ito yung human rights ko. Hindi, dapat lahat ng tao, they know their human rights and they participate in the fighting of their human rights. Kaya nga, di ba, meron tayong mga right to redress, may mga welga, ganyan. Kasi, pag isang tao lang yung nagwewelga, walang power, di ba? Pero pag participatory, pag marami, yan. Although hindi ko kayo inuudyo ka na, wala tayong ganun. Okay? Just citing examples. Pag participatory, pag marami, mas malakas. Okay? Yung ating ipinaglalaban. Okay? And then, empowering individuals. Yun nga, once you know your rights, you feel more empowered kasi alam mo yung kailangan mong ipaglaban. Whether you are an individual, a group nga, okay, may grupo kayo, or an entire community. Again, what is part of human rights education is about knowledge, na-discuss na natin, skills, attitudes, or values. Na, yun nga, it's already recognized internationally. Okay? It's recognized from whatever country you may be in, except North Korea siguro na. Okay? But kidding aside, sabi nga natin, all countries, almost all countries, ano yung sabi niya? 80% have at least one human rights education being observed, and then at least all of them have at least 4 or more human rights. Napakaswerte natin sa Pilipinas kasi we have the Bill of Rights giving us as much as 22 or 21 human rights. Okay? Excuse me? Ayun. And aside from that, Bill of Rights lang yon. Marami pang, that's constitutional right. Okay? Excuse me again? Marami pang other rights such as statutory rights or rights given by laws, not necessarily the Constitution. So we are very lucky as a country having many rights. Okay? Next, the definition of the Asian Regional Resource Center for Human Rights Education. It says that human rights education is a participative process which contains deliberately designed sets of learning activities using human rights knowledge, values, and skills as content aimed at the general public to enable them to understand their experiences and take control of their lives. So may mga pagkakahawig, one of which is participative also. So kailangan na yan, nagpa-participate tayo in the fight for our human rights. Again, hindi ko kayo inuudyokan. Ano lang, of course, if there are rights being violated, yun, you can fight for it. Pero kung wala naman at hindi ka sigurado sa rights mo, kailangan pag-aralan mo muna. Hindi yung welga agad. Okay? So what else? Same, we must have knowledge, values, and skills. It is aimed towards the general public kasi gusto nga natin aware yung buong public para yun, we will experience, okay, we will understand our experience or understand our experience as stated herein, and we will take control of our lives. Hindi yung, yun nga, mamanipulate tayo o makontrol tayo ng ibang tao. And ayun, speaking of general public, meron akong fearless forecast, no. I am forecasting na in the future, not necessarily near future, but someday, human rights education, kasi sa ngayon, parang subject or course lang yan ng criminology at ng law or Bachelor of Laws. I'm not sure about about political science kung pinag-aaralan din nila. Pero I have a feeling, okay, a guess, na balang araw it will be a subject or a course for everybody na ituturo na yan sa lahat ng tao. Hindi lang sa criminology, sa law, or whatsoever. Kasi yun nga, kailangan lahat ng tao alam yan. Kasi generally, meron naman sa constitution sa ngayon. Pero yun nga, constitution kasi, although nandoon din yung Bill of Rights, pero in general kasi yun ay constitution. Okay? So, pero yung specifically for human rights, iba pa yun. Okay? Kaya I think there will be a time na masiseparate siya as another course or subject. Okay? And finally, the last definition is about the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. So as it's stated herein, human rights education is both a means to achieving the protection of human rights as well as a right in itself. Okay? So, kumbaga, human rights is, number one, it is a means para ma-pursue natin yung human rights, ma-protektahan natin yung human rights. So, para ma-implement yung human rights, dapat kasi i-educate mo yung tao. So, it is a means, number one. But in itself, it is also a right. So, human rights education is also a right. How does that happen? Take for example, the Miranda Doctrine na lang or the Miranda Rights, di ba? You have the right to remain silent, you have the right to counsel, you have the right, what else? You have the right to be informed of these rights, di ba? So, kailangan ma-inform ka ng mga rights na yon. Kasi kung hindi ka na-inform ng rights na yon, ayun, na-violate yung right mo. Okay? So, human rights education is a right in itself. Kailangan ma-inform ka. Dapat ma-educate ka about your human rights. Kasi pag hindi, that would be a violation of your human rights. Take note that although there are many definitions of human rights education, there are common elements. Meron yung pagkakapare-parehas nila, such as awareness raising or yung yun, pagpapalaganap, okay, ng kaalaman at nung minumulat natin yung mga tao, okay, about their human rights. There should be participation. Hindi lang gagawin yan ng isang tao. It should be participated by everybody. There is empowerment kasi yun nga, mas nagiging matapang ka, mas nagiging maganda yung tingin mo sa sarili mo pag alam mo yung karapatan mo. Okay? And then you will have the motivation to act also aside from empowerment. Because you know that this is your right, mas alam mong ipaglaban siya. Mas alam mo kung paano ka gagalaw or paano ka, ano yung actions na gagawin mo. Because you know your rights. Okay? So with that being said, that finishes our discussion for today. Thank you very much for listening. So if you have questions, you may post in our Microsoft Teams for our students at Tarlac State University. Or for others and even the students, you may comment on the video below, okay? Para tayo ay try nating sagutin kay whatever your questions will be. Okay? With that being said, thank you very much and do not forget to like and subscribe, sabi nga nila.